The Federal Reserve just made a decision that could end the dollar's reign as the world's reserve currency. And they did it quietly, while Congress argues about the debt ceiling and the media obsesses over the next election. BRICS nations just got the green light to dismantle the financial system that's kept America on top for 80 years. The Fed doesn't want you connecting these dots yet, but by the time most people realize what's happening, it'll be too late. Look, here's what they're not telling you. The U.S. national debt just crossed $35 trillion. That's not new. Everyone knows that number. But what is new? The Federal Reserve's latest policy shift just made that debt America's biggest vulnerability. See, for decades, the world had to use dollars. Oil, dollars. International trade, dollars. Want to do business globally? You needed our currency. That was the deal. But the Fed's recent moves, keeping interest rates elevated while simultaneously expanding the balance sheet, created the perfect storm for BRICS to launch their alternative. And believe it or not, they've been planning this exact scenario for over a decade. Let me walk you through what just happened. In late 2024, the Fed made a choice: keep rates high to fight inflation, but also keep pumping liquidity into the system to prevent a banking collapse. Sound contradictory? It is. Now, look, central banks deal with contradictions all the time, but this one's different. Because every time the Fed prints more dollars while rates stay high, foreign creditors holding U.S. Treasury bonds get nervous. They're watching their investments lose value in real terms. China's already dumped over $300 billion in treasuries since 2021. Japan's slowing their purchases. Saudi Arabia? They're having conversations with Beijing about oil contracts in yuan. These aren't coincidences. The Fed's dual mandate trap just became a weapon in someone else's hands. And here's what makes this even more dangerous. The timing couldn't be worse. The U.S. is facing a refinancing cliff. Over the next 3 years, nearly $7.6 trillion in government debt needs to be rolled over. That means the Treasury has to find buyers for that debt, or the entire system seizes up. Normally, not a problem. The world lines up to buy U.S. debt. But we're not in normal times anymore. Foreign central banks are already reducing their dollar reserves at the fastest pace in 30 years. The percentage of global reserves held in dollars dropped from 73% in 2001 to under 58% today. That might not sound dramatic, but in the world of reserve currencies, that's a freefall. And it's accelerating, but that's not even the craziest part. See, while the Fed was playing defense, BRICS was playing chess. In August 2024, the BRICS summit announced something the Western media barely covered: a new settlement currency backed by a basket of commodities, gold, oil, rare earth minerals. Not a full replacement for the dollar, not yet, but a parallel system. Let's be real for a second. This isn't some conspiracy theory. The documentation is public. Brazil's already conducting bilateral trade with China in yuan. India and Russia are settling oil payments in rupees and rubles. The infrastructure is being built right now. And here's the kicker: the Fed's rate policy is accelerating this shift. When the Fed keeps rates high, it makes dollar-denominated debt expensive for emerging markets. They're suffocating under the weight of our monetary policy. Countries like Argentina, Egypt, Pakistan, they're drowning in dollar-denominated debt they can't service. Every time the Fed raises rates, their debt gets more expensive. Their currencies collapse. Their economies implode. So what do? They stop using dollars. They're not trying to destroy America. They're trying to survive. But the result? Same difference. Now let me show you exactly how deep this goes. In February 2024, Saudi Arabia, America's most critical petrodollar partner for 50 years, announced they wouldn't renew the exclusive petrodollar agreement. That agreement? It was the backbone of dollar dominance. Since 1974, the Saudis agreed to sell oil exclusively in dollars. In exchange, the US provided military protection and political support. Every country that wanted Saudi oil had to buy dollars first. That created artificial demand for the dollar, trillions of dollars in demand. But now, Saudi Arabia is accepting yuan for oil sales to China. They're in talks with Russia about ruble payments. They've even discussed a digital currency settlement with the UAE. The petrodollar isn't dead yet, but it's on life support. And without it, the dollar loses one of its most critical support pillars. Now here's where it gets terrifying. The US government needs to roll over trillions in debt every single year. And who's been buying that debt? Foreign nations. But if those nations start diversifying away from dollars, even slowly, the Fed faces an impossible choice. Option 1. Let interest rates spike to attract buyers. That crashes the economy. Option 2. Print money to buy the debt ourselves. That triggers hyperinflation. There's no good answer here. And BRICS knows it. They don't need to beat the dollar overnight. They just need to create enough doubt, enough alternatives that the world slowly, gradually stops treating the dollar as the only option. Think of it like this. The dollar's dominance isn't built on superiority anymore. It's built on inertia, momentum, the fact that everyone else uses it, so you might as well too. But what happens when that inertia stops? What happens when China, Russia, Brazil, India, and Saudi Arabia, countries representing over 40% of global GDP, start building a separate financial railroad? You don't need to destroy the old railroad. You just need to build a better alternative and wait for people to switch tracks. That's the hostage situation. The Fed's $35 trillion debt isn't just a number, it's leverage. And right now, the people holding that leverage are sitting in Beijing, Moscow, and Riyadh, not Washington. Let me give you a concrete example of how this works. Right now, if Nigeria wants to buy oil from Saudi Arabia, here's the process. Nigeria converts its currency to dollars, uses those dollars to buy oil, and Saudi Arabia holds those dollars or reinvests them in US treasuries. The US wins twice, once from the currency exchange, once from the treasury purchase. But under the new BRICS system, Nigeria could convert to yuan, buy oil directly, and Saudi Arabia holds yuan or converts it to gold through the BRICS settlement platform. The US gets nothing. Multiply that across hundreds of transactions, thousands of companies, dozens of countries. Suddenly, the dollar isn't essential anymore. It's optional, and optional currencies don't stay reserve currencies for long. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but the US economy is still the largest in the world. The dollar's not going anywhere. And you'd be half right. The US economy is massive, but size isn't everything. Not anymore. Because here's what's changed. The dollar's value was never just about the size of the US economy. It was about the lack of alternatives. For 80 years, there was no other option. The euro tried, it failed. The yen tried, it failed. Even China's yuan couldn't break through. Until now. What's different this time? 3 things. First, commodity backing. The BRICS currency isn't just fiat paper like the dollar. It's partially backed by gold, oil, and rare earth minerals. Real assets, tangible value. That makes it attractive to countries tired of watching their dollar reserves evaporate through inflation. Second, network effects. This isn't just China trying to go solo. This is Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, plus Saudi Arabia, UAE, Egypt, Ethiopia, and Iran all working together. That's 3.5 billion people. That's half the world's oil production. That's the majority of rare earth minerals. You can't isolate that. You can't sanction that. It's too big. Third, digital infrastructure. The BRICS nations aren't building a physical currency system like the dollar. They're building a digital settlement system using blockchain and central bank digital currencies. It's faster, it's cheaper, it's more transparent, and it completely bypasses the US banking system. No SWIFT, no correspondent banks, no US oversight. That's the nightmare scenario for Washington. Because for decades, the US didn't just control the dollar. We controlled the infrastructure the dollar ran on. We could freeze accounts, block transactions, enforce sanctions. That power, it's slipping away, and the Fed's policies are greasing the slide. Let's talk about what happens if this continues. Scenario 1. Slow erosion. Over the next decade, the dollar's share of global reserves drops from 58% to 40%. International trade slowly shifts to alternative currencies. The US loses its exorbitant privilege, the ability to borrow cheaply because the world needs dollars. Interest rates on US debt rise. The government cuts spending or raises taxes to cover the gap. Standard of living declines. America becomes just another country, not a collapse, just a decline. Scenario 2. Rapid collapse. A major geopolitical event, a war, a debt crisis, a Fed policy mistake, triggers a mass exodus from dollar assets. Foreign central banks dump treasuries. The dollar crashes. Inflation spikes to double digits. The Fed's forced to choose between defending the currency or defending the economy. Either way, millions of Americans see their savings evaporate. That's the nightmare. And we're closer to scenario 2 than most people realize. Because here's the thing about reserve currency transitions. They don't happen gradually. They happen in fits and starts, slowly, then all at once. The British pound was the world's reserve currency for a century. In 1945, it was still dominant. By 1956, finished. 11 years. The Fed seems to think the dollar's invincible, that America's too big to fail. But history says otherwise. Every empire thinks it's permanent, right up until it isn't. So what does this mean for you? If you're holding dollars, and let's be honest, most of us are, you're exposed. Your savings, your retirement accounts, your paycheck, all denominated in a currency that's slowly losing its monopoly. Now, I'm not saying run out and buy gold bars and bury them in your backyard, but I am saying you need to understand the risk, because the financial media isn't going to warn you until it's too late. They're still pretending everything's fine, but the smart money, they're already moving. Ray Dalio's been sounding the alarm for years. Hedge funds are diversifying into commodities, foreign assets, Bitcoin. Even central banks are buying gold at record levels. They see what's coming. The question is, do you? Look, I'm not saying the dollar collapses tomorrow, but I am saying the rules of the game just changed. The Fed made a bet that the world would keep playing along, that our debt didn't matter because everyone needed us. That bet? It's not looking so good anymore. If you want to track how this unfolds in real time, I've linked some resources below. Data most people won't see until it's already priced in. Otherwise, just keep a close eye on foreign treasury auctions over the next 6 months. Because the fire's already started. Most people just haven't smelled the smoke yet.